Did you have an occasion to respond to that location on January 10th, 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
What time, if you recall, did you respond?
I believe I received the call around 9:30 p.m. from Detective Darren Smith of the Atlanta Police Homicide Unit. He advised me that there were 3 subjects shot at that location.
Are you called only when there is a confirmed death, or are you called before you know whether or not someone has died?
It depends on the status of the paramedics when they transport. If they say the person is low critical, we respond because there's a good chance that they might not survive once they get down to Grady.
When you responded on January 10th, 2015, did you have any confirmed deaths?
Not until I arrived on the scene.
What information or what were you responding to?
I was responding to 3 subjects that were shot. One is low critical, one is in critical condition, one is in critical but stable condition.
And would you tell the jury what the names of those 3 subjects were?
Yes, ma'am. The first subject that was in critical condition was Donovan Thomas, and I want to make sure I pronounce their names right. You might look at my notes?
No, and
Okay.
if you, I'll hand you a copy of your report.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. The second subject that was in critical condition was Reginald Hendricks, and the third that was in critical but stable was Cardarius Sanders.
Now, did you have an opportunity when you arrived on scene to speak with either of those 3 people?
No, ma'am. They was already transported to Grady.
All right. When you arrived on scene, had the scene already been cordoned off or roped off?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you arrived on scene, was there any other homicide detective already there assisting or directing?
Yes, ma'am. Detective Smith was on scene.
Now, was Detective Smith up in the rotation or was
No,
it
ma'am.
yours?
No, ma'am.
So when a detective is not up in rotation, how is it that one homicide detective would be working a scene before you, if it's your homicide?
Yes, ma'am. That depending on how many detectives are working that day. There's a lead detective that will go out to the scene, gather the information, start processing, and they'll notify the next up homicide detective that there's a call and there's 3 subjects. Like on this day, 3 subjects that were shot.
Okay. How familiar with you were with the area of 330 McDaniel Street before you got that call on January 10th, 2015?
Very familiar.
Had you ever interacted with persons in that area on a casual basis as opposed to during an investigation?
Yes, ma'am. Doing an investigation.
And when you say during an investigation, is it only during investigations that you interacted with persons in that area?
Yes, ma'am. Just about. Yes, ma'am.
Were there or was there an apartment complex in that area?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember the name of the apartment complex?
No, not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I believe that one across the street, down the street, was Castleberry Apartments.
Okay. Were you familiar with or had you had any occasion to visit or be familiar with Castleberry Hills Apartments?
Yes, ma'am.
When you got on scene, did you make any efforts to locate surveillance footage?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jury what efforts you took to locate surveillance footage.
Immediately that caught my attention was there was cameras fixed on the barbershop at 330 McDaniel Street. Also, I noticed that there were surveillance cameras down at the gas station at the intersection of McDaniel Street and Northside Drive.
Was it daytime, nighttime, something in the middle when you arrived on scene? I did not ask that question.
Well, we know, we know the time, so.
Let me ask a better question. Was there daylight, moonlight, was there natural light for you to see on scene when you arrived there?
No, the street was lit up with city lights.
Okay. And how were you able to see the cameras that you were able to identify?
They were just fixed on the building, so you can look up and see.
All right.
the cameras.
At the time that you saw them, did you know whether or not they were working?
No, I did not.
Did you take steps to find out?
Yes, I talked to the owners.
All right. And when that happens, are you able to get the camera footage on scene immediately, or do you do something to get that footage?
Yes, ma'am. I contact the cyber crimes unit, who goes out and retrieve all type of video surveillance for us.
Detective Teague, are you familiar with Detective Teague?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does Detective Teague do for you during your investigation?
Detective T went to those different locations and downloaded the video surveillance from those locations. I gave him the dates and the times.
Okay. Did you, at the time, know whether there were, or did you learn if there were any surveillance cameras at the apartments across the street from 330 McDaniel Street?
As I walked over there the next day, I saw that there was no cameras facing McDaniel Street.
And what other efforts, if any, did you take to get surveillance footage or any kind of captured footage of what happened at 330 McDaniel Street?
It was just those two locations that had cameras.
Okay. When you said that you went to the Texaco, where were you focusing? Where was it that you understood the shooting to have occurred?
The shooting happened right in front of the barbershop. The vehicle was traveling down McDaniel Street to Northside Drive and made a right onto Northside Drive. And that would place it right in the path of the Texaco cameras.
How did you learn what the vehicle did without saying anything that anyone specific told you? How did you learn?
People that was on the scene.
Okay. And at the time, on scene, the night of January 10, 2015, did you get any specific details about the make and model of the car? Any definitive details?
No, ma'am, except that it was probably a silver or a light gray colored vehicle.
Okay. When the Atlanta Police Department investigates a homicide, do they have ways of soliciting information from the public that might assist in the investigation?
Yes, we have what is called the Crime Stoppers hotline. Information given that leads to a portion of the investigation or successful arrest of the investigation. There's a $2,000 reward for any information given.
And where do you display that? Do you put it on TV? Do you put it in newspapers or something else?
It is displayed on TV, and also we post flyers around the neighborhood.
Did you do this with the McDaniel Street murder that you investigated?
Yes, ma'am.
What was it that you put on TV?
Basically, there was a subject that came inside with an assault rifle. When I identified who that person was, because they were not on scene when I got there.
Now, when you say a subject that came inside with an assault rifle, inside where?
The barbershop, I'm sorry, the barbershop.
And why did you put that particular footage on?
Because I want to see what this person was a person of interest that may be related to the shooting itself, that he may have been one of the shooters.
Did you later learn whether that person had any relationship to either of the victims?
Yes.
And what did you learn that person's relationship was to either of the victims?
I learned through the parent that was their son and the brother of the decedent.
Okay. Other than the footage of the person going into the barbershop, did you have any other footage displayed on television to try and help in your investigation?
I believe we just closed captioned the screen of the vehicle coming by. We didn't show the actual shooting itself, just the vehicle.
And when you say closed caption the screen, did you do a still shot or did you play a portion of a video surveillance?
Yes, what we did, we condensed it down so that the shot would just show that's the vehicle coming down the street. And we had a couple of still shots in there of the vehicle, but we never showed the victims getting shot themselves.
And did you show footage from the barbershop or the Texaco?
The barbershop.
Did you ever display any footage from the Texaco on TV?
No, ma'am.
All right. How do you decide which footage you're going to put out there and which footage you're going to hold back?
Based on the relevance, because the Texaco did not show the actual shooting itself. The barbershop did.
To your knowledge, did you all get Crime Stoppers calls or people calling in after you put up the video from in front of the barbershop?
Yes, ma'am.
When you arrived on scene, were there people who were willing to talk with you and have their names listed as witnesses?
There are people willing to talk, but they don't want to list their names.
And how did they make that known to you?
Simply by giving me the information, and I said, "You want to come down and talk to me?" And they're like, "No, that's all. As far as I'm getting involved. This is who was involved."
Are you able to force people to get involved more when you're conducting crime scene investigations?
No, ma'am.
Are you not able to take people down to the police station if they tell you that they have some information?
We can ask for their consent. If they say no and we force them down, that's called kidnapping.
Okay. All right. Did you have any persons that you were able to talk to, but you were able to also list out their names?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember who those people were?
One person in particular was a person by the name of Spencer Wright.
Now, let me ask you this. Was at the time you went to 330 McDaniel Street on January 10th, 2015, did you see a Spencer Wright on scene?
No, ma'am.
Did you talk with a Spencer Wright on scene?
No, ma'am.
How long after January 10th, 2015, did you talk with Spencer Wright? Without saying anything Spencer Wright said?
Probably around the month of October 2015, maybe.
And was there anyone with you when you learned of Spencer Wright?
Yes.
All right. Who?
Detective Gaither of the Gaines Unit.
When you first began your investigation into Donovan Thomas Jr.'s murder, was it a joint investigation with the gang unit, or did you do something to have them become involved?
It was a joint investigation. They were providing me with information and intel stemming from their investigations on gang-related activities. And what they deemed may be relevant for my investigation, they passed it on to me.
Did you delegate any duties to members of the gang unit to aid you in your investigation?
Some just...
Or better yet, did they offer up assistance?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Who within the gang unit offered up assistance in your investigation into the Donovan Thomas murder?
Detective Gaither and Detective Dennis.
Did you gain information that allowed you to interview people in relation to the homicide without saying any information that you gained, just yes or no? Did you get information?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you conduct interviews?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, the night of the homicide, did you direct anyone to reach out to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And who did you direct to reach out to you?
Kenneth Copeland.
How did you reach out, or how did you direct Kenneth Copeland to reach out to you?
Upon returning to the homicide office so I can start my investigation, I got alerted by the Zone 3 Morning Watch Mobile Patrol of a shooting that just happened on Van Ira.
Mm-hmm.
And from what the officers gathered was that this was...
Sustained.
Okay.
We won't talk with
Okay.
you about the officers on Van Ira
Okay.
and what they said.
Okay, ma'am.
But were you able to determine whose residence or what was on Van Ira at that location that the officer told you about?
Yes, it was Kenneth Copeland's baby mother's house.
All right. And how did that cause you, why was that of interest? And to ask a better question, what did you do after you spoke with the officer about the shooting on Van Ira?
At that time, I went out to the scene myself.
Okay. Did you speak with anybody on scene at Van Ira?
Yes.
Who did you speak with without saying what they said?
I believe her last name was, now I look at the notes.
Nope, I don't mind at all.
I don't want to mess up her last name. Quartermain.
Okay.
Deshaun
Quarterman?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you speak with anyone else?
I spoke with Kenneth Copeland over her phone, over her cell phone.
All right. What did you see at Van Ira that caused you to be interested in talking to Kenneth Copeland? What did you see?
There were assault-style rounds, spent shell casings in the middle of the street.
Now, were you able to see what type of shell casings, if any, were on scene at 330 McDaniel Street?
Yes, ma'am.
And what type, if you recall, did you observe on scene at 330 McDaniel Street?
At 330 McDaniel Street, there were 7.62 assault rifle rounds. There were 45 caliber rounds and 9mm caliber rounds.
How familiar are you with firearms?
Very familiar.
And what training have you received in firearms over your career, not only as a law enforcement officer, but in the military?
Extensive.
All right. Tell the jury what kind of training.
Basically, the uses of the weapon, the safety of the weapon, and what particular weapon is able to fire what kind of round.
All right. Have you had occasion to fire those type of weapons that you saw shell casings for on scene at 330?
Yes, ma'am.
What you saw on Van Ira, were they similar type rounds? Not necessarily caliber. Were they similar or different?
They were assault rifle rounds, so they similar but not similar.
Okay. And when you say similar but not similar, could you explain a little bit more?
Okay. The 7.62 rounds that was recovered from 330 McDaniel Street are typically fired from AK-47 assault rifle.
Mm-hmm.
Any rifle built off that schematic. The rounds that we recovered from Van Ira was rounds that is associated with the AR-15
Okay.
assault rifle.
Do you recall how many rounds you observed at Van Ira?
I want to say possibly 10 to 12, or 10 to 15, something like that.
Did you observe any damage to any structures or property at Van Ira?
Yes, there were some defects to the residence.
Were there any people shot at Van Ira?
No, ma'am.
Were there people at home at the time that the residence was shot up, or something different?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. How long did you stay on scene at 330 McDaniel Street from when you first arrived?
I believe I arrived probably about 4, maybe 5 hours.
Okay. So approximately what time did you leave?
I left probably around 1:30 a.m.
And what time would you say that you went to check out Van Ira?
Probably about, the call came in, I want to say probably around 1:40, 1:45 a.m.
All right. And where were you when that call came in? Had you made it back to police headquarters, or
Yes,
were you
ma'am.
still on scene?
I made it back to police headquarters.
And how long did it take you to get to Van Ira after you got that call?
Probably about 10 minutes.
Okay. Did Deshaun Quarterman offer to have you speak with Mr. Copeland, or did you ask her to call Mr. Copeland?
I asked her to call Mr. Copeland.
Okay. Did she tell you her relationship to him before you asked her to call him?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to get his phone number from her or any information like that?
No, ma'am.
How long did you speak with Mr. Copeland?
Roughly about maybe 3 minutes, just to let him know that he needs to come down to the office and talk to me.
Did he come down to the office and talk to you?
Yes, he did.
Do you have any idea how long after you asked him to come down and talk to you that he actually arrived at the police station?
I'm gonna say probably between 20 to 30 minutes.
When he came to the police station, do you recall, did you meet him in an interview room at the police station?
No, actually, I met him.
Oh,
No.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I met him in the rear of the police headquarters.
Okay.
I was standing by. I'm sorry, I was standing by with his brother, waiting for him to get there.
Who is his brother?
I forgot his brother's name. I don't recall his brother's name.
Are you familiar with anyone by the name of Rontrez Brock?
Yes,
Do you remember whether that was the brother or was
yes. Ron Brock was the brother.
Now, how is it that you came to be standing there with Rontrez Brock?
Because he got word that people was coming after his brother.
When you met with Mr. Copeland and his brother behind the police department, was that something usual that you do? Like, why do you meet behind the police department as opposed to?
It was easier parking for them.
Okay.
Instead of having to park and walk all the way up, I just said, meet me here. I can get your brother in, get him upstairs and talk to him.
And did you get Mr. Copeland in and upstairs to talk to him?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you first saw Mr. Copeland, do you remember what his demeanor was like? Whether he was sad, happy, excitable, based on what you could observe and see? Or something wholly different?
It was something totally different. He was even keeled, and he just kept asking, he don't know why people putting him in this.
Okay. Did you tell him that he had to come upstairs and talk with you?
No, I didn't tell him he had to come upstairs.
Did you have the ability at that time to force him, or would that have been another situation like kidnapping?
Yes, ma'am. There'd been another situation like kidnapping.
Okay. Did his brother come upstairs and talk with you?
His brother came up and stood by outside.
All right. Did anybody else join Mr. Copeland in that police station?
No, not that I recall.
Okay. Do you remember about how long you talked to Mr. Copeland in the police station?
I think maybe a couple of hours, an hour or two.
Did you talk to him inside an interview room, outside an interview room, or both?
Inside the interview room.
Did you start any conversations before you got to the interview room?
No, just basically that his name had come up in the investigation.
Okay. Now, when you have people that you want to talk to, are these interview rooms always equipped with recording devices, video and sound?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they running constantly, or do you turn them on before you take someone inside?
You turn them on and you log it in to our database up under your particular case number.
Okay. And when you began talking with Mr. Copeland, did you read him any Miranda rights or just start?
No, ma'am, because he was not under arrest, so it was a non-custodial interview. So there was no need for me to Mirandize him. We just started conducting the formal interview with him.
When you began conducting the interview with Mr. Copeland, did you have any particular target in mind that you wanted to have him implicate?
No, ma'am, no particular target.
And as you interviewed him, did you attempt to get him to tell you somebody did any particular thing?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And were you telling him the people that you wanted him to talk about, or were you asking him for information or something in the middle?
Yeah, I was asking for information, and pretty much the question was always in the middle.
Okay. When you began talking with Mr. Copeland, did you have knowledge about any people that you wanted him to give you information on?
No, ma'am.
All right. And during the course of your conversation with Kenneth Copeland, did you get information that led you to other people you were interested in talking to?
On that initial night, no.
Yeah. And was there any particular concern that you understood Mr. Copeland to have that night?
Other than he spoke about an altercation.
And when he spoke about an altercation, did you say anything to suggest to him that you knew about the altercation?
Somewhat, yes, ma'am.
Now, did Mr. Copeland's, did he ask you questions during the interview?
I think it was just general questions like, how did my name come up in this? Once again, I don't know why.
Did he try to get you to help him in any way in terms of ensuring his safety?
Yes, ma'am. He wanted me to speak with the family of Donovan Thomas, let them know that he had nothing to do with it and stop coming after him.
Okay. Now, did he know, or did you tell him that it was these people coming after him, or was he just speculating, to your knowledge?
He was just speculating.
Okay. Did you give him any assurances about what you would do to try and ensure his safety?
Yes, ma'am. I told him I would speak with the family and let them know that at this point in time, he is not a person of interest or suspect.
And when you gave him that assurance, when you told him that, did you have any information that anybody in Donovan Thomas's family was involved in shooting at Kenneth Copeland or his family?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No information.
At the time that you told Kenneth Copeland that, had you spoken with any member of Donovan Thomas's family?
Not at that time.
Did you at any point go to the hospital where Donovan Thomas was taken?
Yes, ma'am.
When?
The next day.
All right.
Well, the morning of the next day.
11th?
Yes, ma'am, the 11th, the morning of the 11th.
How long after you spoke with Kenneth Copeland did you go to the hospital?
I want to say about close to midday. About close to afternoon, because I went and spoke to the other two surviving victims.
Okay. Without saying what they said, were they able to communicate with you at the time that you talked with them?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And let's start with Mr. Sanders. Without saying what he said, was he willing to talk to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he offer up any information about who it was that committed the shooting?
No, ma'am.
And what about Mr. Reginald Hendricks?
Yes, ma'am. He was willing to talk.
Do you remember how long you talked to each one of them?
Because they were down at Grady, I made sure I didn't do an extensive, interview with them. So I had to say probably about 20 minutes apiece, no more than 20 minutes.
Were either of them under arrest at the time you spoke with them?
No, ma'am.
Did you do anything like read Miranda rights or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
Were there people in the room with Cordarius Sanders when you talked with him?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was in the room?
His mother.
Right. Did his mother communicate with you without saying what she said? Did his mother give you any information that helped you in your investigation?
No, ma'am.
Was his mother the only person in the room with him?
That I can recall, yes, ma'am, that I spoke with.
Do you remember how old Cordarius Sanders was at the time?
I want to say maybe he was 14, something like that, 14, 15. He was a juvenile.
All right. And what about Mr. Hendricks? Was there anyone in the room with him when you spoke with him?
I don't recall anyone else in the room with him.
Okay. Do you remember about how old he was when you talked to him? Was he older than
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes, way older.
And was he able to give you any information about who committed the shooting?
No, ma'am.
Was he able to describe whether there was any acts of aggression that he saw that could have prompted the shooting?
No, ma'am.
By the time you talked to Mr. Sanders and Mr. Hendricks, had you had a chance to look at the surveillance video from either the barbershop or the Texaco?
No, ma'am, not at that time.
Okay. Do you remember when the first time it was that you had a chance to look at the barbershop video?
I probably want to say probably later on that evening.
Okay. And what about the Texaco footage?
The next day.
Now, as you're looking at the barbershop footage, Did you personally recognize anybody that you saw display faces of anybody that you saw out there?
No, ma'am.
What about the Texaco footage? Did you see anybody you personally recognize in the Texaco footage?
No, ma'am.
Without?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I mean from when you first saw it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you, in releasing the information you released to the public, did you ever release a make and model of a car, to your knowledge?
No, ma'am.
All right. When you spoke with Mr. Copeland, did you ask him about being involved in any kind of accident?
Yes, ma'am.
Without talking about what anyone else said, do you know why you asked him about being involved in an accident?
Yes, ma'am, because I started a deep dive investigation on his name.
Uh-huh.
And put him through the APD, Atlanta Police database. And I was able to suss out several reports of him connected to being in an accident or traffic stops.
Okay. And were your questions based on whatever vehicle you saw reflected in that report, or
Yes,
something
ma'am.
different?
What was reflected on people's description of people was given of the vehicle.
The incidents that you saw within the database, were they incidents that had occurred in 2015, January 2015, or earlier, 2014? Around what time frame?
I think there was a time frames of 2012 to 2014.
Okay. Did you have the same kind of familiarity with Kenneth Copeland as a child that you did with Mr. Zachary?
No, ma'am.
When, if you recall, was the first time you knew about Kenneth Copeland? Like how old was, like around what year?
2015, the year of the incident.
Okay. Other than what you learned as you began investigating the murder of Donovan Thomas, did you have any other knowledge about Kenneth Copeland?
No, ma'am.
Did you ensure or did you offer to do anything else to, or offer any advice to Kenneth Copeland to help him secure the safety of his family? Did you make any suggestions?
I think probably general
Okay.
suggestion of that nature.
All right. Did Kenneth Copeland have any cell phones or anything with him that you saw when you first talked to him on January the 11th?
I didn't see him with a cell phone.
Okay. Now, do you remember Mr. Copeland offering you, and let me ask you this, the interview with Kenneth Copeland, it was recorded, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, when was the last time you could remember looking at that interview? Like, did I show it to you today?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And do you remember everything about that interview? Everything?
Not everything in detail.
Okay. Like the kind of clothing Kenneth Copeland was wearing. Do you remember that?
I couldn't remember. I think it was dark clothing.
Okay. All right. Did Kenneth Copeland offer to give you any information that might help you sort of determine that he should not be a target of any retaliatory shootings?
Yes.
All right. Did you follow up on the information that he gave you?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you tell the jury the ways that you followed up on whatever Kenneth Copeland told you?
Yes. The information I got from Kenneth Copeland, I immediately went to Detective Dennis and Detective Gaither to see if they knew about this information. They knew about it. They gave me details on it. He was able to find that they had already started an investigation themselves into it, I believe.
Before. Your Honor, he's not.
The very last comment.
Well,
Say.
Your Honor, I would say that it is offered as a explanation for his investigation and why it is that he took certain steps. So, and also that the jury has heard from these witnesses as well.
Go ahead with your next question.
Okay. Before you got the information from Mr. Copeland that you went to investigators Dennis and Gaither about, did you personally know about any of that?
Not personally, no.